What's up, everyone? I'm Jinteki. Here we like to reflect on the niche, underrated, obscure, and forgotten. And this game I would 100% consider underrated, especially by me initially, but more so in the sense that not nearly enough people have experienced what this game has to offer. I really thought that after playing the demo for this game, that this game was just going to be a cheap knockoff of what is my favorite video game of all time, that is Bloodborne. And that's what I mean when I say this game genuinely lied to me, because I couldn't have been more wrong. I really underestimated this game, and I am so glad that I let my friend convince me to give it a chance anyways after I had already tried the initial demo. So now let me tell you why you should also give this game a chance. So today we are reflecting on Lies of P. Alright, so I have to start this video off with a couple of caveats and maybe some ground rules for the rest of the video. So number one, yes, this is a Souls-like game, right? And if you don't like Souls-like games because you've always found them too difficult, I don't have a lot of good news for you here. I would continue watching to see maybe why you should consider this video more like a you should try instead of a you should play, but to be honest, this is a pretty hard game. At least for me, it's a pretty difficult game. I think there are certain players that might find it easier, and I'll get into that, but for the most part, this game is it's very difficult. I did say that Bloodborne is my favorite game, right? And you're going to catch me talking about this game in terms of Bloodborne and Sekiro a lot. And that's mostly just because it's a lot easier to explain this game in terms of those other games. But I do consider this game fantastic in its own right. Like, you don't have to compare this game to Bloodborne and Sekiro to consider it a good game or a bad game or whatever you think. I don't think it has to be compared to those games. But the devs do wear their Bloodborne influence on their sleeve. Oh, whoops. Ran out of stamina. No. Oh, God. They do wear their influence on their sleeve, so you're going to catch me mentioning Bloodborne and Sekiro a lot. Somewhat contradictory, but it is what it is. And by the way, if you haven't played either of those games, I mean, you'll still be able to follow along, of course, but, you should go play those games. And here, I'll just toss up two thumbnails to two games or two videos I'll never make, because you should play Bloodborne and Sekiro. I don't need to make a whole video about it. Man, I suck. You might have heard that the story to this game is based off of Pinocchio, right? It's based off of the Adventures of Pinocchio, the story, the fairy tale. And what I really want to say is, and this goes for both the gameplay and the story, please do not underestimate this game. If you think that this game is just going to be like edgelord Pinocchio, which, I mean, admittedly, I thought it was going to be, it is smarter than that. It is, the gameplay is more than just a Bloodborne ripoff. It's smarter than that. It does its own things, and it does all those things very well. It is, again, a fantastic game in its own right. So just trust me on this. When I'm really trying to get at, do not underestimate this game. Alright, everyone, welcome to the city of Krat. You all could not have shown up at a worse time. You might have heard that Lies of P is a Souls-like game that adapts the story of Pinocchio into a dark and gritty fantasy setting. But saying it adapts feels inaccurate. I think it would be more accurate to say that it is loosely based off the story of Pinocchio, despite all the references and parallels to the source material. We begin the game in an abandoned train car in Krat's Grand Central Station, awakening as Timothy Chalamet. Awakening as Geppetto's puppet. And right off the bat, you might be expecting me to call this character Pinocchio, But if you're expecting that, then I think you're already underestimating this game, and I told you not to do that. For you see, this game never actually calls your player character Pinocchio at any point. They don't even call him P, as the title would suggest, although the marketing and wikis occasionally do. In-game, you're only ever referred to as Geppetto's puppet, and so that's all you'll ever hear me call him. A voice calls to Geppetto's puppet saying, "We need your help." And we venture outside the train car to grisly corpses and a world filled with maniacal killer puppets. You see, Krat was once the city of great innovation, and easily the city's crowning achievement were the puppets. Invented by none other than Geppetto, the puppets were completely autonomous beings that could sing, dance, perform, and do manual labor and even police work. Unlike the artificial intelligence you'd see in science fiction, these puppets were not powered by electricity or machine instructions. Rather, all the puppets in Krat are powered by a miracle substance known as ergo. You'll learn more about ergo as the game goes on, but right now the player's main concern is getting to safety and dealing with the nightmarish crisis that is the puppet frenzy. And that's the basic premise and where we start Lies of P. I'm not going to dive deeper into the story just yet. As usual, I just wanted to give you enough to know what's going on so that we can delve into the gameplay and what I think makes it so compelling. And afterward, we'll dig our heels a little deeper into the story. Now, without a doubt, the central theme of Lies of P is lying, obviously. And we'll talk about that later on when we delve deeper into the story. But I think there's another theme that permeates all throughout the game, in both its story and its gameplay. A theme that completely drives the narrative and mechanical opportunities that you'll be getting to explore. And it's the first word that came to mind as soon as I realized that I wanted to make a video on this game. And that word is choice. I think the thing that shocked me the most when I was playing through the game for the first time was that the game kept on throwing new systems and mechanics at me. And eventually I felt like I had a sort of like Swiss Army knife of options to throw at any given obstacle. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's take a step back. How does the gameplay to Lies of P actually work? Alright, well, like you might have seen in the transition screen, the core combat of Lies of P is basically if Bloodborne and Sekiro had a baby. The movement and long startup and recovery animations are similar to what you'd find in any FromSoft game. As a matter of fact, when I started the demo, I had just gotten off playing Bloodborne again, like a recent playthrough, and I could basically take a one-for-one, like the game feel of what I thought should happen from Bloodborne and apply it to this game. Even down to some of the enemies' animations, like the guard dogs, their wind-up attack is almost taken straight out of Bloodborne, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it is what it is. You have a dodge that you'll probably be using a lot. It definitely has invincibility frames, but feels a little harder to use than the dodge from Bloodborne. You can also block, and if you do, you'll take less damage, and you'll even get to recover some of your health if you attack the enemy in time. This is similar to the rally mechanic in Bloodborne. And similar to Sekiro, if you block at just the right time, you'll also get a parry. And you'll also be using that a lot. Quick tip though, if you're coming from Sekiro, it will save you a lot of frustration. In Sekiro, you just sort of have to tap at the right time in order to parry, but in this game, you kind of have to commit to your parry more so it will work. I think it's because the check for a perfect parry starts up later in the animation, so be sure to hold the button down for a moment whenever you go for a perfect block. But alright, pretty straightforward so far. So now let's take a look at the basic moves the enemies have at their disposal. For the most part, enemy attacks can come in one of two flavors. You have normal attacks and you have fury attacks. Normal attacks are everything you'd expect. They can either be dodged, blocked, or parried, or you can just run out of the way in order to deal with them. But fury attacks completely turn the game on its head. Fury attacks cannot be blocked, and they completely ignore the invincibility frames of your dodge. And already, before we've barely dipped our pinky toes in the combat of Lies of P, the game is already giving a choice to the player. Or at the very least, they're asking the player to decide how they're going to go about things. You see, fury attacks come up a lot in Lies of P, and your success will hinge on your ability to properly deal with them. Are you going to try to get out of the way, knowing that dodging is more difficult? Are you going to try and completely get out of range of the attack, possibly easier and safer, but leaving you in a less desirable position after the attack? Or are you going to be brave, stand your ground, and risk a perfect guard, leaving you in a more ideal position and dealing stagger damage, which will bring you one step closer to a stagger attack? And of course, lots of games have simple decisions like this, but it is from here that all the other aspects of the combat stem from, and so it was important that we establish this before we uncover the rest of this iceberg. And we begin delving beneath the water to uncover the weapon system. Alright, so the vast majority of weapons in Lies of P are made up of two parts, the blade and the handle. Just about every weapon you find will come with both a weapon and a handle. But these weapons can then be disassembled, and the blades and handles can be mixed and matched to your heart's content. In general, the weapon blades tend to determine the type of damage you'll be doing, so slashing, stabbing, etc., along with the amount, in addition to how much damage is reduced whenever you guard. While handles, on the other hand, will determine how your weapon scales, whether by motivity, technique, or advance, which is strength, dexterity, and elemental damage respectively. The handles also determine the weapon's actual move set and handling. But there's another huge consideration you'll want to remember when making new weapons, and that's Fable Arts. Each blade and each handle each come with their own Fable Arts. These are special abilities that can have a huge impact on the way you play. Some of these Fable Arts are simple massive attacks that have the capacity to stagger enemies or put them in a stun state akin to a heavy attack, while others boost damage, resistances, or even give you all new options in combat. So for example, my favorite Fable Art that comes only on a couple handles that I've found is Endure, which allows me to withstand an enemy attack, even fatal attacks, for a short period. This was the handle that I used to beat the game on my first playthrough. Now with the handles, you can also further customize your weapons by using something called cranks. Cranks allow you to shift the way a handle scales in both motivity and technique, one step up or one step down for either. So for example, if we take a look at this handle that has B motivity scaling and D technique scaling, then I can use a motivity crank to raise its motivity scaling up while eliminating the technique scaling. Or I could use a technique crank to make it balanced in both, or I can even add some elemental scaling with an advanced crank. Are you getting an idea yet of how much this game gives you to play with? This system is honestly fantastic, and if you're anything like me, you'll be spending way too much time trying to get your weapon just right to how you want to play. And the fact that you can, and no combination seems to come without its downsides, really reinforces the theme of choice that I was talking about at the beginning of this section. Also, before I forget, there are some pre-built special weapons that cannot be disassembled that offer yet more unique ways to play, so look out for those. Next up on the iceberg, we got Legion Arms. The hunters from Bloodborne got a sidearm, and the wolf from Sekiro got a mechanical arm. And I guess the developers couldn't choose which one they wanted here because you kind of get both with the Legion Arm. Legion Arms are a lot more straightforward than weapons. They're mostly a matter of just choosing the right arm for the right situation, though which Legion Arm you upgrade is also important, since each Legion Arm can also have new abilities unlocked. You can also upgrade your main weapons, by the way, I forgot to mention that. Now when you level up, you can collect Ergo to put it towards your usual soul sets. But as you play the game, you'll also come across a very important and unique resource called Quartz. And with Quartz, you can put points in a sort of tech tree and critical to the story mechanical organ, unfortunately named the P organ. The P organ is segmented into different abilities that can be unlocked by filling in every slot for that ability. And when you fill in a slot, you also choose an upgrade from one of 4 different categories, further specializing your character as the game goes on. Decisions, 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 and we're not done yet. You have a number of equipment slots that give you various boosts to various defensive stats, alright? Nothing crazy there. Be aware that we're also borrowing a little bit from Dark Souls' equip load mechanic with the weight system. The heavier your equipped armor and weapons, the slower you will move and regen stamina. But of course, with heavier gear and heavier weapons, you tend to hit harder and your defense will be higher. Now the crucial thing about weight is that it's governed by its own separate stat, capacity, meaning that if you want to carry heavier equipment without penalty, it's going to come at the opportunity cost of putting ergo into other stats such as vigor. Capacity also determines your effectiveness when using your Legion arm. And real quick before I forget, healing is done using pulse cells, which is a lot closer to how Sekiro handled healing versus how Bloodborne did, meaning you don't have to endlessly grind for healing items when you run low. A very nice feature of pulse cells is that when you run out, dealing damage will start to recharge a pulse cell, which is nice because it kind of makes you feel like you're never totally out of healing or out of the fight. Now on to one of my favorite mechanics of combat, and one that I think might be a little controversial to some people, but I love it personally. That is durability. And holy crap, what a 180 from a game like Bloodborne where I absolutely hate the durability mechanic. In this game, as you continue to fight, your weapon's effectiveness will slowly fall off. If you're not doing anything, you can hold a button to sharpen your weapon back to its full effectiveness. And it doesn't take very long, and usually it's a pretty optional decision on whether you want to repair or not. Just never let your weapon degrade all the way or else your weapon might actually break. But holy crap, let me tell you that this adds such a wonderful little wrench into boss battles. In the middle of a boss fight, you might suddenly realize that your weapon's durability has gotten low. And now you've got another decision to make. Do you take the time to repair your weapon? And if you do, when? When you stagger an enemy, you could go for some extra damage after your super attack, or you could take this time to resharpen your weapon. And this really makes you feel like boss battles are a real dance when you're switching between dodging, guarding, perfect guarding, resharpening, guarding, perfect guarding, and dodging again. But if that's all it was, I would just think it was really neat, and I did. I thought it was really neat even from the demo. But the game also lets you bring in special grindstones that are typically one-time use and allow you to add either an element or some other special buff, giving you yet more options and decisions before combat. Here on screen, I set my weapon on fire with this, and of course this is all in addition to the consumables that you could use to do the same thing. So with all these mechanics, I think in some ways, some could arguably make the case that maybe Lies of P is a little easier than other Souls-like games simply because you have so much customizability and you have so many different ways to tailor the combat closer to your own playstyle. However, I don't want to give the wrong impression with that statement. I use the term arguably very loosely there because this game is by no means a cakewalk. And if you're one of those people who are afraid of the difficulty of this game, really hear out what I'm about to say and listen to the whole thing because this first part might put you off. At the time of this writing, playing through the game again, I spent about 2.5 hours on a single boss, and I'm only about halfway through the game. Now keep in mind, I tend to not be very good at these kind of games, but I have beaten the game. And I know that I could beat the game again much quicker than the pace I'm going if I really wanted to. And that's because the game also gives you one more major boon when it comes to combat. And that boon is specters. Similar to Bloodborne's summoning bells, and exclusively for the boss battles, you can summon an AI partner to help you in these boss fights. Now this is probably the most controversial mechanic of this game for Soulsborne veterans, but the game gives you a grindable resource that you can use to summon these AI partners. And then you can use a very special consumable called a wish stone to buff your AI partner in a myriad of ways. It's up to you whether you want to try and play through the game as a specter-less run, but don't go feeling like using specters is somehow cheating. It's very clear that the devs use the specters to add even more choice and more depth to combat and boss battles. Play the game in the way that is most enjoyable to you. I used specters on my first playthrough, and this time around I'm trying not to just because I'm having fun playing the game that way, and there's honestly no other reason. Alright, before we get to the end of this section, a few quick tips for combat. I have seen people online say they've gone through the whole game using only dodging or only parrying and guarding. And while I think it's cool that you can do that, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I think the ideal way to play Lies of P is to use a bit of both, using your entire Swiss Army knife of mechanics and equipment to adapt to whatever challenge you're up against. And while maybe you could go through the whole game using only dodging, and I have tried to do it against some mini bosses just to test it out and it has worked, I've also seen people go through games like Bloodborne using only a torch, and I'm not about to do that. Also, just like Bloodborne and Sekiro, if you find yourself dying a lot to just the regular enemies, never forget that you can just run by them and ignore them for the most part. The game does allow you to respec later on in the game, and it's fairly lenient as far as how many you get, so go nuts. Alright, so hopefully by now you've gotten the impression that I really like the gameplay to Lies of P. Now, one of the things that I think this game does really well is the way it drip feeds all these mechanics and the new systems to you. So I think you'll only start to get all of the mechanics when you're about maybe halfway through the game. And so by then, that's when you'll feel like this like Swiss Army knife of options that I was mentioning before. But what I really like about the game and about all the systems is that it feels like beating a boss isn't just about, getting good, as like they, people like to say with these Souls games. There's also this this feeling of once you beat a boss, yes, you did get good, but you also kind of like solved this puzzle. Like whether it's this puzzle of how to beat this specific boss or just how to tailor the game to yourself. You sort of solve this complex puzzle, and then you've solved it when you finally beat that boss that's been like kicking your ass for the past hour. So I feel like this game, gameplay wise, it's as if you got Bloodborne with a bunch of the quality of life improvements that you would want from Bloodborne if they ever made like a Bloodborne remake or a Bloodborne 2, which I'm not holding my breath on that one, but like Bloodborne with all the quality of life improvements, then you sprinkle some Sekiro in there with the perfect guarding, and then you add their own stuff on top of it, like with the weapon system and the unique durability system, and you do all that, and I think that's what this game is, and I think it's just like this wonderful mix of all these things. I think it's just such a joy to play. You could play this game just because it's a fun game. But the good news is you don't have to play this game just because it's a fun game. Man, I need more stamina. The good news is you can play this game for the gameplay, and whenever you beat a boss, you will be rewarded because you will get to uncover more of the world and the story. There is actually a lot of very cool lore in this game. The story is great, and getting to uncover more of the world, getting to discover more about the world and what's going on and the mystery and all that in it of itself is another worthwhile reward. So again, it's just a great all-around package. So let's take a break from the gameplay and let us talk about the story here in this upcoming section. Let's see if I can beat this guy first though. I didn't know that would work. Oh god. No. The answer was no. On to the next section. Now, before I go any further, I need to make one thing clear. On this channel, whether or not I decide to spoil the entire story to a game is never going to have anything to do with the merits of the story itself. Rather, it's all going to depend on whether or not I believe that you, the viewer, should actually go and play this game. Because I think that Lies of P's gameplay is fantastic, and actually I think the overall package of Lies of P is fantastic, I'm going to try very hard to avoid spoilers as much as possible. And that is despite the fact that I want to talk about all the coolest aspects of what is going on here in the story. Now, I would maybe consider making another video separately on the story and lore of Lies of P, but to be honest, I've seen some videos on YouTube already that do just a fantastic job, and there's no way, I couldn't really add much to them. So at the end of this section, I'm gonna recommend a video to you guys to learn more about the story and the lore if you'd like to. Alright, now I had left off in the beginning by mentioning the puppet frenzy. What I didn't mention was that there's actually another crisis going on in Krat at the exact same time as the puppet frenzy. A devastating disease that turns people's minds and bodies to stone, known as the petrification disease. And this aspect of the game and the story is almost entirely original to the stories of Lies of P, and is even maybe about like 50% of the entire plot. And yet it manages to intertwine wonderfully with the puppet subplot and the aspects of the story that borrow heavily from the source material, The Adventures of Pinocchio. Throughout the game, Geppetto's puppet will be slowly beginning to change, and if you know anything about Pinocchio, you can probably guess what that change will entail. But the beautiful thing about Lies of P is it doesn't take the very obvious route that you might expect to reach this change. Throughout the game, you will get the opportunity to tell lies. And you can imagine that if you follow the logic of the most popular adaptations of Pinocchio, telling lies will push you further and further away from becoming human. But when you think about it, that really doesn't make any sense, because lying and deception is really something only life is capable of. And the game acknowledges this, and I think offers a wonderfully nuanced view of the role that lying plays in all of our lives. And it uses aspects of both the book and the Disney movie to get this idea across. The story of Lies of P is presented in a much more straightforward manner versus most of the other Souls games. So by the time you get to the end, you'll have a fairly complete idea of what's going on. But the more you learn about this world and how well thought out it is, the more you will get out of it. And I can almost guarantee that by the time you get to the end of it, you will be excited to see where the story goes. And even before that, I think there will be moments of the game that surprise you. Stuff that I really want to talk about, but I really do not want to spoil for you. So I'm just going to say what I said at the beginning of the video. If you think this game is going to take the easy way out with its Pinocchio source material, do not underestimate it. Please play this game. Alright, we're coming up towards the end of this video, so let's start wrapping this up by talking on the graphics and music. I think in every video when I talk about the graphics, it will be pretty quick, because I'll either like it, dislike it, etc. Especially since you can all see it for yourself. And, holy shit, this game is beautiful. Krat is a beautiful city that really does feel like people live here. The environments are gorgeous, the design of the enemies are cool. But the music, specifically the soundtrack, holy crap, man, I was really surprised. The background music is really good. I mean, there's not any particular track that stands out, but it does its job, it's serviceable. But as you play the game, you might come across these records that you can play at the record player at the Hotel Krat. And the first time I ever played one of these records, that was the moment that I realized that the devs put their heart and soul into this game. Well, that's all I got. Actually, there are a couple of small things here and there that I think that I didn't mention throughout the video, like, for example, the fact that I like the voice acting, the fact that I kind of wish that your character was just a little more puppet-like initially, like they acted a little more, mechanical, or maybe when they die. I know that there's some story implications to why he's a special puppet who looks so different and he doesn't look very mechanical, and they use that in the story. But I do wish that for example, when you died, maybe your limbs fell off or something. Also, I was disappointed initially with some of the puppets, because the puppets, they don't or most of the puppets, especially at the beginning of the game, they don't exude like any of their puppet behavior from before they went all feral. They all kind of growl and screech, kind of like Beast from Bloodborne, I guess. And it would have been cool, I think, if they at least had voice lines from their old self. That it might have made the game a little more eerie, or maybe more off-putting. If for example, one of those police robots, when they're coming to attack you, say, "I'll keep you safe, citizen." Small stuff like that here and there. But all the other stuff, it's pretty nitpicky. I mean, as overall, I think the game is fantastic. Hopefully I got that point across. Hopefully by now it's not ambiguous how I feel about this game. I don't want to ramble. I don't want to overcomplicate my feelings. So let me just finish this off with this. I love this game. I want you to play this game. I think the asking price on Steam is worth it, but the game is also available on the Xbox Game Pass, and for that value, it is an easy pick up and play. I cannot wait for the second installment of this game and for the DLC that should be coming out soon, I think sometime later this year. And I hope I helped you to some extent to understand why you should be giving this game a chance. Alright, that's the end of me talking about Lies of P. Guys, my goal for this year is to come out with at least 2 videos every month for the entire year. Really 24 videos. It doesn't exactly have to be 2 a month, but that's my goal for the year. And my primary goal is to learn something new with every videos, improve on something. You know, I make mistakes with the last couple videos, and there's always stuff that I'm unhappy about with every video. But if you are watching up until this point, please go down in the comments and leave me some feedback. It can be positive feedback, it can be negative feedback, I do not care. Leave me some constructive criticism so that I can just make better videos. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, or if you haven't, go ahead and check some of them out, and go ahead and leave comments there too of what you think I did right or what you think I did wrong. I would really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching. This has been Jinteki, signing out.